So, allow me to tell you all a story. The first memory I ever have of playing a video game was in the year 2002. I was around 4 years old, and I think we were living in the house before the one we are in now. Back then, there was the Xbox, the GameCube, and the absolute titan known as the PlayStation 2. And what did we have around then? We had a Sega Genesis. I know we were behind on the times by like 2 or 3 generations, but I mean, we were never in the best spot financially, and why spend money like that? You know, that's around $345 in today's currency on a PlayStation 2 when your oldest children are 7 and 4 respectively. So my mom swears that my first video game was Echo the Dolphin, which, no. However, I do remember my first game being something a little different. So, I don't remember a lot from my first memories with Sonic, minus the fact I could never get past the actual beginning of Green Hill Act 2. Look, I may have been able to read back then, but I would never consider myself smart at the age of 4. However, what I do know is that there was something about that blue hedgehog that had me hooked even more than 20 years later. Through seeing Cityscape for the first time, which is a story for the eventual Sonic Adventure 2 video, to watching Sonic X every Saturday morning after getting home from Junior League Bowling, to watching AMVs on YouTube, to watching the Sonic OVA in parts at 240p, because that's how we used to do it back in the day on YouTube. Hell, I even created my YouTube account just to keep up with Some Call Me Johnny and some other people. All the way back, and let me check the date on this. 14 years ago. Oh my god. Over the years, I'd not only fondly played, but beat Sonic 1, 2, 3, CD, and even 3D Blast. It's only recently to where I've came to the conclusion that Sonic 1 through 3 might be my favorite trilogy in gaming. When these games came out, trilogies often had the initial game laid the foundation, a second game that took a hard 180 from what they were initially doing, and the third game being the actual evolution of what they started. However, all 3 of Sonic's numbered games back in the 90s was building on top of what the prior one was doing. From graphics to the scope of the stages, to music, to new mechanics, to even continuing the story. They were constantly trying to improve. And the best part, they were still incredibly simple to pick up and play. Even the changes they made were simple enough to where it wasn't overkill. And that's the point of this video, to just talk about the games in depth, where they work, where they don't, and where we blast process. All in the name of showing my appreciation to the franchise to celebrate its 33rd anniversary. So for full transparency, I am using 3 fan variants of these games for the sake of recording. Sonic 1 Absolute and Sonic 2 Forever, which uses the official mobile ports from Taxman Stealth as a base for their game, and Sonic 3 Air, or it's also known as Sonic 3 Angel Island Revisited, which uses honestly any ROM of Sonic 3 as its foundation. I think all 3 of these games are the best version of Sonic 1, 2, and 3 because they come with a lot of nice quality of life updates and a lot of bonuses in each one that I think you should heavily check out, on top of the fact that they're all free. I'll leave links down below on how to install them. So it's the late 80s. Nintendo has ruled with an iron fist after saving the industry from the crash of '83 when they dropped Super Mario Bros. In 1985. And Sega was a step behind with their system at the time, the Master System. They were prepping to drop their next generation console, the Genesis, or Mega Drive if you live literally anywhere that's not the United States. Sega knew if they wanted to truly compete with Nintendo, they needed a legitimate mascot that could hang with Mario because Alex Kidd just wasn't doing it. So what they decided to do was hold a contest within the company to see who could create their flagship character that appeals to the American audience specifically. One of these teams that worked on the concept was programmer Yuji Naka and artist Naoto Oshima. The idea of the project was a high-speed platformer that had the sprite roll into a ball utilizing the processing power of the Genesis. President Hayao Nakayama gave the green light for Naka and Oshima to move forward with the project, and added game designer Hirokazu Yashiura to create what's essentially the founding trio for now what we know as Sonic Team. After some time making the game itself, including creating a main character inspired by Michael Jackson and then Governor of Arkansas turned US President Bill Clinton, Sonic the Hedgehog was born on June 23, 1991, with high-speed gameplay by the standards back then and being a pack-in title for the Genesis, at least for the American side. Sonic 1 would sell 2 million copies by the end of 1991 and would let Sega gain a 65% market share increase, officially making them a real competitor for Nintendo. But how is Sonic 1 as a game? Back then it was definitely revolutionary, but in my eyes it's okay. Like, don't get it twisted, I love this game, mainly due to nostalgia reasons, and I do have fun with it, but it also isn't perfect. Much like Super Mario Bros., because it is the first game in the franchise, it is incredibly bare bones. It's a game that advertises going at super speeds, but the pacing and stage design really is actually the game's biggest problem. Once we get to talk about each stage individually, I have a tier list for each zone and where I'd put them in terms of how fast you can go and just overall enjoyment. The plot is simple. Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik is using his mechanical genius to take over South Island by turning the resident animals into creatures called Batniks. And also he's trying to harness the power of these mystical gems known as the Chaos Emeralds, which are rumored to contain infinite power. It is up to resident carefree hero Sonic the Hedgehog to go across all the zones, free his friends by opening these capsules at the end of every zone, stop Robotnik anywhere he sees them, and to try and collect all the Chaos Emeralds before the Doctor does. We begin our journey in Green Hill Zone, World 1 if you will. It's here in this almost tropical locale where we get to grips with the gameplay loop. You run from point A to point B where the stage starts and ends with the goalpost in Acts 1 and 2, and then you get to open the animal capsule in Act 3. You collect rings to ensure you don't die in one hit by a Batnik. If you gain 100 rings, you get an extra life, and having 50 by the end of Act 1 and 2 lets you enter a special stage to give you a chance to collect a Chaos Emerald. While running through the game, you need to avoid getting hit by Batniks, avoid pits, spikes, and other hazards, all the while beating the act within 10 minutes or you'll lose a life via a time over. At the end of Act 3 is where you'll enter a boss fight with Dr. Robotnik where you'll win after landing 8 hits. Green Hill does its job as an introductory stage to perfection. It's bright and cheerful, you can go fast, you learn the basics of not just the game, but really any 2D Sonic game. And it's, dare I say, as iconic as World 1 in Mario Bros. For that alone, I put Green Hill in Sonic Speed tier. Before the next zone, I think it's a good time to take a quick detour to talk about the special stages in this game. As I said, the requirement to enter one in this game is having 50 rings by the end of Act 1 or 2, and entering inside this giant ring. After you enter the ring, you get teleported to this maze with this trippy background. You do not actively control the maze, only Sonic's general direction. The maze is constantly rotating with you almost being at the mercy of the spin. Now, there are a couple of ways you can manipulate the rotation. There's 2 buttons you can hit throughout the stage. The up and down switches adjust the speed of the rotation by increments of faster or slower depending on the button you hit, along with the reverse button that, well, reverses the rotation. The Chaos Emerald is always in the heart of a bunch of crystal things that you have to touch multiple times to get rid of. The only way you can fail the special stage is if you hit a spot that says goal. They're typically not hard to avoid. Keyword is typically. What the fuck? What the fuck?
Oh, not mashing hard enough.
I'm so glad I got that. What the fuck? I clipped through the special stage.
You did it.
So yeah, 50 rings grants a continue, 100 grants you an extra life. Get the emerald, there's 6 Chaos Emeralds in total, go crazy. The maze isn't like the best special stage, but it is the worst ever, and trust me, we'll get to that. After running past the green hills, we get to Marble Zone, the second zone in the game, and we're already slowing the pace down. Lava being all over the place between pits, rivers, and even falls trying to burn you alive with the introduction of crushers that not even rings will save you from. It's slower than Green Hill, and you need to be careful, but there's places where you can keep a good bit of speed. The boss fight in Act 3 has Robotnik going back and forth across the screen, shooting down lava, temporarily making that side of the screen useless. Not a hard fight at all, none of the fights in this game are really challenging. In terms of where I'd put Marble Zone, I think I'll just put it in jogging tier. Once you've worked up a sweat from all that heat, you arrive at Spring Yard Zone. Technically our first casino level, but none of the gambling. But there is a spot or two where you can pinball. If you haven't gotten a grasp of how the slope physics work, you'll get the hang of it here. Taking advantage of the massive downhill slopes, you can get massive airtime, which you can use to carry that momentum into running at full speed. Now, you'll have to stop for a bit to deal with the elevators that can indeed crush you, and be careful not to accidentally fall into the pits the boss is creating during the fight in Act 3, but other than that, you can indeed go fast. To kick off the second half of our journey through Sonic 1, we have what I seriously think is the worst stage in classic Sonic, Labyrinth Zone. A zone so slow, so fun-killing, that I'm going to go ahead and slap it in its own tier. You are going to spend a lot of time underwater, which means not only is your speed and jump non-existent, but this is where you learn about Sonic's fear of water because Yuji Naka was a bit silly one day and honestly thought hedgehogs couldn't swim. When in fact, guess what? They can. Your only way of avoiding drowning in this game is to either get an air bubble, which spawns throughout the acts, or you can go above water if all possible. The one, and I mean one thing, I will give this zone is that this fight is a bit different. Instead of an actual fight, it's a chase sequence to reach the top. You don't even have to beat Robotnik. All you need to do is survive. Good news is that we can only go from here. And boy howdy, moving up in the world we do because we have arrived at Starlight Zone. And just listen. That, my friends, is something that highlights the one thing I have failed to mention this entire time. Composer Masato Nakamura and his group Dreams Come True. And they are absolutely cooking with this soundtrack and setting up the high standard known as Sonic music to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, speed in my Sonic game is back. We have slopes, we have platforming, we have seesaws that you need to understand for the boss. We have your actual last two shots at an emerald with Act 1 and 2. It's just a really fun time, and that's why Starlight Zone is the only other zone in this game to get put in Sonic speed. We arrive at the last zone in the game, Scrap Brain, Robotnik's base of operations. This zone is dangerous since there's things everywhere that will get you killed, which in that respect, I guess it's good because your last chance at the emeralds was the stage before, and you don't particularly have a chance to exit the stage with 50 rings if you're not particularly good. One thing I do really like about this stage is that everything gives off the vibe that this is the end of the game and you're on Robotnik's doorsteps. The music, the atmosphere, the difficulty, everything is just right. So, how's Act 3, you may ask? Well...
All around me, Eggman's, worn out Eggman's, worn out Eggman's, right in. I'm back in the fucking building again! Oh my god!
Actually, not that bad when you take the shortcut at the beginning. Do it and you can be out of there in less than a minute. Still an extremely troll move by Sonic Team, and you're done. That's it, Scrap Brain has no boss because the final battle is right up ahead. Welcome to Final Zone. It's just you and Robotnik, no badniks, no power-ups, no help, no rings. Just you and a mad scientist hiding randomly in crushers and shooting balls of electricity. The music, the backdrop, the tension. It's incredible. I think besides maybe one other time, there isn't another fight in the classic trilogy that has this feeling of danger. Don't get me wrong, the other final bosses have merit of challenge and tension in their own right, but Final Zone just hits different. But after 8 hits, the fight is done, Robotnik runs off, and it's up to you if you want to either let him go or give him one final hit for the road. With that, the game is done, Sonic runs back to Green Hill to celebrate with his newly freed friends, and if you collected all the Chaos Emeralds, you will use their power to spawn some flowers, and after the credits, Robotnik will throw a tantrum. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the good ending to Sonic 1. Again, while this game definitely has issues with pacing especially, man, I love this game. The music, the charm, everything just works for me. And the best part is, quality-wise, it just gets better. Also, just to finish the tier list, I'm putting Scrap Brain at take your time. So, you would think that after the success of the game, that making a sequel would be easy. Unfortunately, that isn't how it works at all. Yuji Naka actually quit Sega due to circumstances he deemed unfavorable, and then got rehired back as a member of Sega Technical Institute in the US. Hirokazu Yoshida went over to STI with Naka to start working on Sonic 2 in November of '91, while Naoto Oshima stayed with Sonic Team in Japan to work on Sonic CD for the Sega CD, which is an add-on for the Genesis. The development of Sonic 2 would face massive hurdles during development, including a language barrier issue at Sega Technical and a 1-year crunch, making where levels were cut due to ensuring the game would have some sort of quality assurance testing and just overall making sure that the game would be ready to ship. Which the game would finally release on November 21st, 1992 for Japan, and then just a few days later on the 24th for the United States. And actually, Sega of America would take the advantage of the fact it was coming out on a Tuesday by doing a marketing campaign known as Sonic Tuesday.
Now, when you buy the Sega Genesis that comes with Sonic 1, you'll get Sonic 2 absolutely free. Sonic 2 handles stubborn stains, embarrassing bald spots, no problem. It even slices and dices, makes thousands of julienne fries. But wait, you can play it too. This free Sonic 2 is a $54.99 value. You get 2 Sonics for the price of 1. Sonic 2 fits easily into any tackle box. Made from a space-age polymer plastic for years of family fun. And pets love it too. Buy the Sega Genesis that comes with Sonic 1 and get Sonic 2 free.
Act now. Wiener Dog Sweater sold separately.
Sonic 2 is objectively a better game than its predecessor. It's faster, it's more colorful, the bosses are more unique, it's slightly better paced, and the scope is bigger. Oddly enough, and I know this is going to be a take of somewhat higher temperature, by how much I don't know, but as someone who got to play Sonic 2 at around the same age as Sonic 1, I prefer to go back to Sonic 1 before I would go back to Sonic 2. It sounds weird, I know, but there's a massive factor that we'll get into. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad game, because it's definitely a step up in basically every aspect, and it's a fun time. Just hear me out. Story-wise, it's been an undisclosed amount of time since Robotnik's defeat of Final Zone, but he's basically finished his latest project, The Death Egg, which doesn't look anything like you may have seen somewhere else. To truly power the station, he requires all the Chaos Emeralds, including the recently discovered 7th one. Is up to Sonic and his new friend Miles Tails per hour. Get it? Miles per hour. But we just call him Tails. Tails possesses the ability to fly using his 2 tails and an intellect that matches Robotnik to stop the Mad Doctor from taking over the world with his super weapon. The game begins at Emerald Hill Zone, which is the more colorful and tropical-looking little brother to Green Hill. Here is where we get to refamiliarize ourselves with the general 2D Sonic gameplay, on top of some new additions. One of, if not the biggest change to the gameplay, is the iconic Spin Dash. Hold down the D-pad and mash the jump button as many times as you want to build the speed, and boom! Sonic and Tails will start moving across the screen at top speed, which has now been increased to where you can stay on the right side of the screen, zipping through the stage. Another massive addition to the gameplay is Tails himself. He can be controlled at the exact same time as Sonic by the player with a, albeit slight delay, to mainly act as a secondary attack on bosses. And help with the special stages this time around, or can be controlled kind of by a second player. Yeah, let's use the clip of... yeah, that, to talk about the special stages. The good news, you can access these at any checkpoint in an act as long as you have 50 rings, which means it is 100% feasible to have all 7 Chaos Emeralds by the time you're done with Emerald Hill. The bad news, it's the half pipe that for a good while Sega loved bringing back. The idea is great, collect a certain amount of rings before hitting the end of that chunk of the special stage, all the while avoiding bombs, but the execution is flawed on 2 main fronts. The first being to really succeed in these special stages, you need to have some sort of memorization to where the rings and bombs are, and the other being... starting at special stage 3 or 4 is where it can become commonplace for Tails to get hit by a bunch of bombs, all due to that slight delay he has. The cure to this issue would be to just play as either Sonic alone or Tails alone, which is doable even in the original game. However, that also eliminates one of the main marketing aspects of the game, is that you can have both Sonic and Tails at the same time. But hey, at least Nakamura and company cooked again. The best thing about the special stages is that they introduce a genuine reward for having all 7 Chaos Emeralds. Collect all 50 rings and press jump once in the original, or some versions all you need to do is just double tap, and you turn into the Golden Warrior of Legend, the hope of the universe, ally to good, nightmare to you, Supersonic. Supersonic is golden, invincible, has a higher jump, and basically goes from 0 to top speed in no time. The only things that can actually hurt Supersonic are drowning and crushing. All this power comes at the cost of losing 1 ring per second. Once you're out of rings, you're back to a defenseless, normal Sonic. Okay, back to wrap up Emerald Hill. The final main thing that is introduced in Emerald Hill is that we change from a 3-act structure to a 2-act. Act 1 is to get to the goalpost, and Act 2 is the boss. This format has essentially become the norm ever since this game came out. Overall, Emerald Hill is a very fun stage. Once Emerald Hill is done, we head straight to Industrial Chemical Plant Zone, which is probably my second favorite level in the game. It's fast. The idea of running through a toxic factory-like setting is really cool. Of course, the chemicals don't kill you. They act like they're really more so water, which you would think I would hate due to Labyrinth Zone, but if you're good enough, you don't even touch the water. Now, the thing I feel like Chemical Plant is known for, besides the music, is this specific point in Act 2, where you have to scale this vertical section with these small moving platforms while the water is rising. This is where I died most of the time as a kid, because if I wasn't drowning, I was being crushed between the platforms. Overall, a super fun stage that all in all keeps the momentum going. Oddly enough, we go from my second favorite level to my actual favorite level in the game. Welcome to Aquatic Ruin. This is supposed to be the real water level in the game. And again, unlike Labyrinth, it is possible to do both acts without touching water if you're skilled enough at the game. I am not that skilled, but it is possible. I love the idea for a jungle ruin type theme for a stage. And just listen to this music. It's just incredible. No real complaints besides maybe not having Chemical Plant and Aquatic Ruin back to back. Okay, now let's talk about Casino Night Zone.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it.
Yeah, this is the first real casino level in the franchise. It has moments where you go fast, but it slows down some with elevators needing to be careful not to get crushed, and entering the slots to see if you can get some bonus rings if you're in need of lives or fuel for Supersonic. The boss here is also pretty interesting. You have to treat it like a pinball board and use momentum to attack from either the top or the sides, and that's really all there is to this level. Not as fun as the previous few stages in my opinion, but still a nice time. Okay, so Hilltop is if you put Green Hill and Marble Zone together, and honestly I couldn't really care about it. Like, it just exists? Like, the rising lava is cool, and you can get hurt by the boss if you aren't careful, but I mean, that's really all there is to talk about this stage. It's simply just there to pad out the level count. Alright, Mystic Cave Zone. This is probably the slowest normal zone in the game, just due to the platforming challenges. If there isn't things that crush you, there's walls that hide spike pillars that if you just play it well enough you can use as steps. There's pulleys to lower the bridges to try and avoid pits. You'd think that I'd be a little sad that the pace slowed down drastically, but sometimes it's nice to have a stage like this, where I would say maybe have it here maybe once or twice a game just to shake up a bit. The boss for the zone is interesting enough too. Robotnik goes up into the cave, dropping stalactites that can hurt you, but other than that, it's nothing like crazy. Fun enough stage though, I'll give it credit. Oil Ocean is slow, it's vertical. It has things that can crush you. You can drown in the oil like it was quicksand. It's just not a fun stage in my humble opinion. The two things that I am willing to give it credit for is that A, running across an oil rig is pretty unique and hasn't been done again, and B, the boss is a harder version of Hilltop, thus making that zone even more pointless. We arrive to the true industrial headquarters of Robotnik this game. Metropolis Zone. This is the only zone in the game that returns to the 3-act structure from Sonic 1. Your experience in Metropolis Zone entirely depends on if you have access to Supersonic. If yes, then you'll speed right through it without any real issue. If not, yeah, that's the typical experience. In all seriousness, if you don't have Supersonic, this stage can be insanely hard with just how bad the enemy placement can be, plus different hazards you'll see all throughout. The boss can be actually really annoying too. Having egg-shaped spheres rotating around Robotnik to tank hits from him with their really weird hurtbox. Main thing I would recommend is that if you don't have Supersonic to cheese the fight is to just damage boost your way to victory. Again, your enjoyment with Metropolis will vary, but I think the overall enemy placement plus the inclusion of Act 3 really does knock the zone down a notch. At this point, there is only 1 act stages, so we can only go from here. You know, I said that Mystic Cave was the slowest normal stage, because Sky Chase Zone is by far the slowest in the game, but I'm going to give it a pass for 2 reasons. Reason 1 is that it's an auto-scroller, so the pace is outside of your control for the first time. Reason 2 is that it's also the first time riding on the Tornado, which any love for the Tornado I will always take. Other than that, we get a bit of story from here on out. We take to the skies to catch up to Robotnik's airship while clearing out the constant wave of Batmix. Again, it's a slow stage, but it's a great change of pace and a nice way to show a bit of narrative, especially as we start seeing the ship as we get closer. And as soon as we get right next to Robotnik's ship is when we enter Winged Fortress Zone. The entire stage is you blasting through the ship to get to the Doctor after Tails actually gets shot down and making it Sonic only for the rest of the game. The biggest problem is just how easy it is for you to fall off the stage. It's easy enough where I would honestly suggest to refrain from turning into Supersonic if all possible. And this is just because of how easy it is for him to hit max speed that you can easily just fall off. The boss isn't even Robotnik. He hides behind the barrier while you destroy a laser with spiked platforms around the arena. It can definitely be hard, but it's nothing mind-bending. But other than that, this was actually a pretty cool stage. Once we defeat the boss at Winged Fortress, Robotnik runs off on a spaceship to head towards the recently launched Death Egg. Sonic has no real way of catching up until Tails shows back up with the tornado, because he is perfectly okay to give Sonic a ride up to the ship where he can get close enough to latch on, thus moving the climax to outer space and our final fights. This is Death Egg Zone. This zone only consists of 3 rooms, the one you spawn in and the 2 boss rooms. And like Final Zone, you once again have 0 rings to speak of anywhere. The first fight is against a robot known as Silver Sonic, the first mechanical iteration of Sonic before the world was introduced to Metal Sonic and CD. Silver has 3 moves he can do: spin across the floor like a spin dash across the floor while standing up, and an iteration of the first move, but he does a bounce in the middle of the stage just to mess with you. All it takes is 8 hits, and the fight is incredibly simple to do. Just gotta be a tad patient. Then, after you defeat Silver Sonic, Robotnik runs down the hallway until he enters the real final boss of the game, the Death Egg Robot. This fight isn't hard per se, you just need to wait for a moment where you know for certain that you're safe, because you may think you're safe from those metal arms when in fact you are not. The best time I can recommend hitting him is when he's sitting completely still. About 12 hits or so, the Death Egg Robot is defeated and the whole Death Egg starts to explode. Sonic barely makes it out in time, but once he turns supersonic, he flies down to meet with Tails, who honestly thought he died when the Death Egg exploded. The last thing we see is Sonic and Tails fly off into their next adventure. Meanwhile, the Death Egg crashes on a nearby floating island with a certain Echidna residing. And that's Sonic 2. Again, as an overall game, it's better than the first. It plays better, it sounds better, it looks better, the stages are bigger. However, despite the increased stage count and size of the stages, that doesn't mean they're all hitters. I think Hilltop is pointless, Oil Ocean is kind of a slog, and Metropolis is boggled down by bad design. And this is on top of all the issues I already have with the Half-Pipe. Is it an overall better game than Sonic 1? Yes, it is. But would I rather play Sonic 1 despite its bare-bones approach? Also yes. Luckily for us, the best of both worlds is right around the corner. With Sonic 2 being a smash hit, selling 400,000 copies in the United States within the first week alone, the team only got a 2-month break before starting development on Sonic 3 in January of 1993. The initial plan was to have it be an isometric game very similar to Sonic 3D Blast, which would later come in 1996. But luckily they decided to go with the traditional 2D side-scroller. The idea was to make the biggest adventure yet to cap off the trilogy, but due to a marketing agreement with a certain clown and cartridge size limits, time crunch was a very, very real thing, and there was no way they could do everything by the deadline. So what they decided to do was to try and minimize cut content and help make sure the game is quality enough to launch. So they decided to split the initial game into 2 separate titles. Sonic 3, which released February 2nd, 1994 in the US, and Sonic & Knuckles, which released October 18th the same year. When working on Sonic & Knuckles, the team wanted to find a way to combine the 2 games, that way the player can get the full experience. So with that, they created Lock-On technology, which essentially makes the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge bulkier than any other normal cartridge. That way another like Sonic 3, for example, can be attached on top to take advantage of a special circuitry on the Genesis to combine the 2 ROM chips and put it through a single address on the system. Using this with Sonic 3 gives you Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the complete version of the game, but we'll just refer to the game as Sonic 3 for now on. And attaching Sonic 2 to the cartridge will give you access to Knuckles in Sonic 2, which is exactly like you think it is. It's just Sonic 2, but you can play as Knuckles. I'll just say it outright, Sonic 3 is my favorite Sonic game and one of my favorite games of all time. The story is active and present. The gameplay is at its peak. These stages are incredibly fun to either blast through or explore to try and get the Chaos Emeralds. And speaking of special stages, They're the best in the series, and I won't hear otherwise. The ride is the longest it's ever been, but man, it's incredible. The story immediately picks up after the events of Sonic 2. Robotnik and the Death Egg have crash landed on a place known as Angel Island, a floating island in the sky that was once home to the race known as the Echidnas, and is still home to the Master Emerald, a source of power even above the Chaos Emeralds. The guardian of the Master Emerald is Knuckles. He is the only Echidna left alive, and he is extremely strong physically. He can climb up walls, plunge through obstacles, and glide for a short period. Only problem with Knuckles is that since he's isolated from the rest of civilization, he can be a bit gullible. Robotnik stumbles upon the Master Emerald in a sacred shrine, which we would find out later is known as Hidden Palace Zone. Knuckles gets defensive once he notices Robotnik near the Master Emerald, but the Doctor uses his IQ to get out of the situation by explaining that Sonic is on his way with the Chaos Emeralds to take the Master Emerald. Knuckles takes the bait and goes to take care of Sonic. Meanwhile, Sonic, while super, and Tails heads towards Angel Island since that's where they saw the Death Egg land. As soon as they land, they get ambushed by Knuckles, who knocks the Chaos Emeralds out of Super Sonic and scatters the emeralds throughout Angel Island. Now it's up to our dynamic duo to go through the island, collect the Chaos Emeralds again, convince Knuckles that they aren't the bad guy, and stop Robotnik from presumably relaunching the Death Egg. And that's the first thing I want to point out. The fact that the game actually starts with a cutscene shows that they're putting more of an emphasis on story than they ever have. And you'll see that with various zone transition cutscenes throughout the game. Speaking of the game, we immediately transition from the opening cutscene into the first zone. Angel Island Zone is what it's actually called. Angel Island continues the tradition of being a great opening level for new players to learn the basics, and veterans get the chance to see what's new with the game. And boy, is there new things going on with this game. The first being that you can actually make Tails more useful than just an extra attack if you're playing as Sonic and Tails. Just jump and the actual input varies on the version, but Tails will jump up and start to fly. Sonic can latch onto him, and for a short period, Tails can help Sonic go to places he couldn't before. The other important change in Sonic's moveset is that he now possesses what's called the Insta Shield. Just jump and tap the button again to create a small shield that is only there very briefly, but will protect Sonic for about half a second and also extends his hitbox just a little bit so that way he can hit just things that are just barely out of reach. Another very useful thing in Sonic 3 is the Elemental Shield. I know that I haven't touched on power-ups really at all, but when your 3 power-ups gives you either a shield, invincibility, or increases your speed for a brief time, they're nothing really to talk about. However, the elemental shields are actual game changers. They do the same thing as the normal shield in terms of like just protecting you for one hit, but all 3 elements have different abilities depending on which one you have. The fire shield protects you from fire-based enemies or fire-based environments, like say lava, and it actually gives you a dash that you can use as an attack. The bubble shield gives you a bounce and protects you from drowning. Oh my god, it took us 3 games, but we can finally not drown. And my personal favorite is the electric shield because it protects you from electric-based attacks in terrain. It gives you a small double jump, and it actually attracts rings to you like a magnet. All 3 are going to be extremely useful throughout your playthrough, and I think they are the best power-ups in the franchise, besides maybe the Lightspeed Dash in Sonic Adventure 2. The final important change that comes with Sonic 3 are the special stages. It took 3 attempts, but they finally got it right. To enter a special stage, all you have to do is just find one of the giant rings hiding all throughout the zones in the game. And that's all you gotta do. Just find the rings, enter, and you're in a special stage. You don't need 50 rings at any point, just find one, go. Once you enter a giant ring, you are teleported to blue spheres. And the goal for blue spheres is very simple. There is a set amount of blue spheres throughout the stage, and all you have to do is just turn all the blue spheres into red while handling the gradual speed increases as you go along. You collect all the blue spheres, and then boom, the emerald is yours. Touch a red one, and you're kicked out. An optional objective in the name of more points is to get a perfect. All that means is that not only do you have to complete the main objective, which is, just getting the blue sphere so you can get the emerald, but you also have to complete the stage collecting every ring possible in the stage. They can either be created by making a perfect square around a patch of blue spheres, or they'll be just scattered all throughout the stage. Blue spheres not only gets harder the more emeralds you have, but if you aren't going for a perfect, then you don't really need to memorize the stage layout. All you need is to explore every zone to try and find the giant rings if you fail or if you don't have all 7. And I think that's how you do it. Reward the player for exploring the levels you created while not making any other conditions to have an attempt at a Chaos Emerald. You collect all 7 and then you once again gain access to Super Sonic, who works exactly the same as last time. Besides, no matter what version of Sonic 3 you play, all you need to do is just double tap. Fun fact, if you lock in Sonic 1 or any other Genesis game to Sonic & Knuckles, then you get a chance to play thousands of pre-generated Blue Sphere stages. Angel Island Zone is really the perfect opening level to introduce all the new things Sonic 3 brings. The first possible special stage can be accessed within 20 seconds of Act 1. There's moments that take advantage of not just Tails, but the new elemental shields as well. Damn near perfect design. What makes this all better? The stage doesn't stay this green forever. That's right, the stage can change mid-act in this game. The zone can catch on fire, the zone could start to rise, the power could go out, and you would have to turn it back on. This game is dynamic and it makes perfect sense for why they had to split it up into 2. And I actually almost forgot that Angel Island also introduces the gimmick of his mini-bosses at the end of every Act 1. None of them are the craziest thing, but it's a nice shakeup. After the first real boss of the game that showcases Tails being extremely offensive, we get our first zone transition scene. We run across the bridge to find Knuckles chilling there and deciding to push a button that destroys the bridge and sends us plummeting down to our next level. Welcome to Hydrocity Zone. Hydrocity? Hydro City? I don't know, I just call it Hydrocity. Anyway, welcome to our real water level for the journey. And like every water level in classic Sonic not named Labyrinth, not only is it fun, but you can blaze through it without even touching the water if you're skilled enough. Or, you could just use Tails to just fly everywhere. Honestly, even if you're in the water, it isn't that slow and you aren't down there forever. I love the idea of having a water stage be an underground ancient city on the island. After an interesting enough mini-boss, you get thrown into Act 2 that starts with what I wouldn't call an auto-scroller, but you do have to keep going before the wall closes in and crushes you. Other than that, Act 2 remains more of what Act 1 offered, minus Knuckles once again destroying the platform under you, which takes you to the boss. You need to use the momentum you gain from the grenades Robotnik drops to get up to him. I think Hydrocity is the peak of water levels in classic Sonic. The atmosphere is unique, it stays fast-paced, and it's just a fun time. After you get launched from Hydrocity, you somehow end up in Chaos Emerald hunting paradise. Welcome to Marble Garden Zone. There's enough big rings in Act 1 alone that if you only have like 2 emeralds entering the stage, you can easily get enough opportunities to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds. This is typically where I wrap up my emerald hunt in the actual Sonic 3 portion of the journey. Now, with that being said, this level is more on the slower side, with you needing to climb slopes, avoid being crushed, and use this spin top thing, whatever it's actually called. After a mini-boss that's basically a repeat of the Mystic Cave boss, we get to Act 2 where the main thing happening is that Robotnik is actively making the level to rise, and you have to make it to a certain point before the ground crushes you. After the final checkpoint of the stage, you have what's supposed to be an aerial battle with Robotnik, where you can typically get 1 or 2 hits in before he zooms off and you have to repeat the process. But you can also just do this. Marble Garden isn't my favorite stage of all time, but it also isn't bad. People might have criticism for having back-to-back Ancient Ruin themes as a backdrop for stages, but I think Marble Garden and Hydrocity are different enough to where I think it's fine. Plus, we're on a floating island where this was home to a now borderline extinct race, so having these kinds of stages kind of makes sense. So we fly away from Marble Garden into an actual clown show known as Carnival Night Zone. As you can guess, the whole motif of the level is that it's a carnival circus thing filled with balloons, bumpers, and barrels. Which, hot take, the barrels aren't as bad as people used to say. All you have to do is just move your D-pad up and down. It's that easy. Carnival Night is a good enough level in the grand scheme of things, but sometimes it does feel too cluttered, especially in like the narrow hallways. What I will give the team credit for is having Knuckles turning off the power during Act 2, so you have to turn the power back on to have some of the level functional again. That is a really creative idea. The actual boss is nothing to write home about, but the mini boss is one you have to be careful with because you can die here even if you're supersonic. Whatever qualms I may have about Carnival Night just don't matter when the transition into the beginning of the next stage is one of the coolest things ever. We shoot out of a cannon and start our first ever ice level snowboarding down a mountain. How raw is that, dude? Sonic is too cool sometimes, I swear to God. But yeah, this is Ice Cap Zone. An ice level with no real ice mechanics, because who would do that in a high-speed platformer? Ice Cap it's fun, it's fast, it's energetic. It's a level trope we've never seen before in a Sonic game. And again, you start the zone snowboarding down a mountain. While I don't have a lot to say about Ice Cap because, I'll be honest, the main flaw with this level is that the bosses are just kind of okay, it's an extremely fun 2 acts that really shows the essence of what Sonic is about. Speed, fun, and attitude. We leave Ice Cap in a tunnel of snow and end up at the final level of the first half of our journey, Launch Base Zone. This is Robotnik's main base of operations on Angel Island, and it's apparent with the danger all around. One thing that was added to Launch Base that I appreciate compared to every other Robotnik level is that there's actually sensors across the zone, where if you cross it, the alarm will go off and send over a couple of flying Batniks. Act 1 is cool and all, but Act 2 is where our launch base really shines. More specifically, the climax. We have an incredibly easy fight with Robotnik. We give chase in his hover pod thing. We get stopped by Knuckles, who then falls off the platform he was on while the Death Egg launches. We continue on and land at the platform that happens to be attached to the Death Egg, where we then get a slightly harder Robotnik fight, but nothing too crazy. You think with how the game acts, that's it.
You'll never defeat me.
I am Dr. Robotnik, the most cunning scientific genius in the world!
I will make you all pay for this.
All systems, full power!
Nope. This is Big Arms, the final boss for what was initially Sonic 3 by itself. If you do not have Supersonic here, then it could be a legit challenge between him being able to catch you and the spikes on his head. This fight is where the Insta-Shield becomes a vital tool for winning. In all seriousness, this fight and Final Zone go back and forth as my favorite boss fight in the classic games. They're just that good. After we defeat Big Arms, Robotnik flies off and we stop the Death Egg from fully launching, once again crashing on the island. Since the Death Egg fell back into the island, so do we, kickstarting the second half of our journey. Sonic 3 by itself, while arguably a shorter experience, and you can tell that there was supposed to be more to it, is still an incredible time from start to finish, and the exact same can be said for the Sonic & Knuckles portion of the game as well. I would dare say Sonic & Knuckles feels more like a complete journey than Sonic 3 by itself does. And that's because when I was a kid, I only had access to Sonic & Knuckles. So I didn't even know that Sonic 3 existed until I first read the manual for Sonic & Knuckles. I'll just say it now, I think the biggest problem with Sonic 3 as a complete game is the pacing, because since it did end up as 2 separate games, that means the flow of the game had to be similar. So what happens is that we go from Launch Base, a proper final stage in a Sonic game, to Mushroom Hill, which we will get to here in a minute, has the awkward position to act as both a halfway point and a first level at the same time. It just doesn't flow as well as it probably should, but I do have a thought that I'll share once we delve more into Mushroom Hill. Hey, speaking of. We continue our journey immediately after Battle on Launch Base Zone, and we find ourselves in Mushroom Hill Zone, an area of Angel Island that is chock full of, well, mushrooms. We go over right a little bit and see that Knuckles survived the fall of Launch Base, and looks like he's trying to hide something. We go down to see what he's hiding, and we see a giant ring that's not the typical gold color. We go through the ring and are teleported to the same area Robotnik was at when he first landed at Angel Island, with not only the Master Emerald, but also a spot for 7 uncolored gems. All of a sudden, as if the Chaos Emeralds were resonating with the Master Emerald, we lose the power once more. But this time the emeralds seem to give their power actually to the uncolored gems, making them bigger in size. These are the Super Emeralds, something you only see in the complete version of Sonic 3, and if you've collected all the Chaos Emeralds before coming to Mushroom Hill. So while yes, you do have to go through the 7 special stages found in Sonic & Knuckles, and once again lose access to Super Sonic, there's 2 key differences. Number 1 is that you actually choose which special stage you can go to every time. All you gotta do is just land on one of the platforms and then boom, you get teleported to a different stage. And 2, the reward is much greater. Collect all 7 emeralds and you'll unlock Hypersonic, which if you consider Supersonic as an equivalent to Super Saiyan, then I'd put Hypersonic with Ultra Instinct or Super Saiyan 3 like we did back in the day. Hypersonic has the same energy drainage issue as Supersonic, but he is now immune to drowning. Yes, it took Sonic to become God to learn how to swim, and now he has a mid-air dash that can not only take him in basically any direction, but will act as a screw nuke for any unknowing badniks. Hypersonic really is just true unadulterated power. And if you play as Tails by himself, he actually gains a super form after collecting all the Super Emeralds, which takes Supersonic, but he can fly faster, and he has a flicky army to act as a Geneva suggestion. Knuckles also gets something, but we'll get to him. Oh yeah, we were talking about Mushroom Hill. Just like Angel Island, Mushroom Hill does a wonderful job as an opening level for the Sonic and Knuckles portion. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I had a thought that doesn't make Mushroom Hill as bad as a halfway point that I was initially thinking, and I just need you to bear with me for a second. I think having a beginning level as the halfway point actually works in the event you do collect the Chaos Emeralds before you get here. Because if you go for the Super Emeralds, then for the time being, you don't have the Emeralds. You don't have Supersonic. You're back to square one, starting fresh. So Mushroom Hill is truly a back to basics level, and for that, I have a new appreciation for it. And on top of that, both the mini boss and main boss are kind of neat. The mini boss in Act 1 is chucking wood across the screen. Now, the wood isn't hitting you unless you just intentionally throw, but it's cool. Plus, the main boss is you giving chase to Robotnik across the forest as you have to dodge spiked hurdles along the way. And once we beat Robotnik, he retreats to an airship where we begin my favorite level in classic Sonic. Ladies and gentlemen, Flying Battery Zone. This has it all. It's got music, it's got energy, it's got speed, it's got platforming, and it has uniqueness. And plus, it has Robotnik destroying his own airship for a second time the same way he did it last time, because for someone with an IQ of 300, he's a bit of a silly Billy. That is the simplest way I can explain why I love Flying Battery so much. Just an overall fantastic time, and fun fact, I audibly screamed when they announced it coming to Sonic Mania. Once we escape the crashing flying battery, we land in Sandopolis Zone. Being a desert ruin is very unique, don't get me wrong, but I'm personally not the biggest fan of it. Going from a perfectly balanced level like Flying Battery to what feels like a complete 180 in Sandopolis just doesn't sit right with me. It actually feels similar to Oil Ocean back in Sonic 2. It's slow, there's quicksand that's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. It feels just a bit too long for my taste. That's referring to Act 1 anyway. After the Golem mini-boss, where all you do is just trick it into going into the quicksand, you go inside the pyramid to start Act 2, and there's some different stuff going on. You break a capsule that releases some ghosts that get more passive-aggressive the more dark the screen gets, and so you have to occasionally pull a lever to lighten the room back up. There's doors on timers, and there's moments where the sun is rising and you have to get to the top of an area before you're crushed. So I'll give Act 2 credit where credit is due, and it's the fact that it does change up from what the zone was initially doing. Unfortunately, that doesn't save Sandopolis from what I feel is the weakest zone in the game, and that's between both Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. The good news is that it can only go up. So after defeating Robotnik's Proto-Egg Golem, we fall into a pit which takes us to Lava Reef Zone. Lava Reef is somehow the first attempt at a fire-based level since all the way back in Marble Zone in Sonic 1, and boy howdy is it 10 times better. But hey, honestly, if we're being honest, that isn't saying a lot. You can keep a decent speed throughout both acts, with the need to be a bit more cautious in Act 2, just because it's a tad more dangerous. Not to say Act 1 is a walk in the park, there's lava everywhere, both acts have fire spouts, there's spiked crushers, badniks who can slow you down. It's not a great place to be at all if you're not, named Sonic. Something very important that I need to know about Lava Reef is that this is your very last chance to collect either the Chaos Emeralds or the Super Emeralds. From this point on, once you beat Act 2, it is entirely just plot. So if you cannot finish your Emerald Hunt after you're done with Act 2, I'm sorry, you're done. Go back to Mushroom Hill or, Angel Island, grind the emeralds, come back later. And after you beat the hand mini boss in Act 1, you then move on to Act 2, where everything is a bit more cooled down. Your surroundings are crystallized, and the soundtrack seems a bit more mystic, as if you're close to something sacred. As you're descending in Act 1, you're now ascending in Act 2. At the Act's climax, you once again run into Knuckles, who then punches a boulder at you, knocking you all the way back down to the active lava, and once you land, you happen to notice that Death Egg crashed here, and it has just been reactivated. So now you have to get back up while Robotnik is shooting missiles at you in his lava-proof machine. Once you get to the last checkpoint, you have no choice but to go back down where there's lava everywhere. Pro tip, the fire shield is your best friend throughout the entire zone. The boss fight with Robotnik is easy enough if you just jump on the sliding platforms, or if you have a fire shield, or if you have supersonic / hypersonic, then it becomes laughable because for the most part you can just stay in place. And this is all because you do not outright hit Robotnik. Robotnik has to hit himself. And with that, he runs off again, and the plot finally takes the wheel. After the Lava Reef boss fight, the lava cools down, which lets us keep moving forward. We're almost seamlessly introduced to Hidden Palace Zone, where the beginning has the same crystals like in Lava Reef Act 2, and the music is the exact same as if we were that close to Hidden Palace the entire time. This is a very short level with some steps, a teleporter, and a checkpoint. You get a weird feeling as if there's a fight coming up. Well, we do have a fight coming where we can finally humble Knuckles, but before that, a very important question has to be answered. We have a fight with Knuckles coming up. Do I fight him honorably, or do I just use my new power?
Oh, you just use your new power. It's in the game.
Hi, Knuckles.
Yeah, that's balanced. Hitting the final smash, I'll move on him.
Man, yeah, that's it. Even without the emeralds, Knuckles is a pushover. But real quick, I just want to point out the mural in the background. there's a powered-up hedgehog chasing after what seems to be a robot holding the Master Emerald. You know, I wonder if that's hinting to anything. After the fight, we give chase to a very familiar place. The same shrine we were first teleported to in Mushroom Hill, and the same one Robotnik first discovered, where we see the Doctor take the Master Emerald for himself, and Knuckles realizes something very important.
We've been tricked, we've been backstabbed, and we've been quite possibly bamboozled.
He decides that he is going to be a good guy now, and help us give chase to Robotnik where he goes to launch the Death Egg, again, for real this time. And with that, we instantly take the teleporter up to Sky Sanctuary Zone, a place in the clouds that is actually away from Angel Island. This is a fun ascent to the Death Egg that has indeed launched from the island. It's fun, it's fast, there's even occasional boss fights of old Robotnik battles from Sonic 1 and 2, piloted by this new roboticized version of Sonic? His name is Mecha Sonic, and don't worry, we'll get to him way later. Just know for right now that we fight him in a redo of Green Hill, and for some reason Metropolis plus a 101 as the actual boss of Sky Sanctuary. And, well, Mecha Sonic fight-wise is a revamped version of the Silver Sonic fight. Don't worry, my glorious king, you will have your time. But yeah, Sky Sanctuary really has an in-game feel to it, between the classic fights, majestic setting, and music, plus the fact it's only a single act. It's a classic stage and was brought back in Generations for a reason. After we beat Mecha Sonic, we climb to the top of the sanctuary and somehow latch onto the Death Egg, which is a legit 2-act stage this time and not just 2 bosses. Death Egg, for the most part, feels a little anticlimactic. We have gravity mechanics, and it's a fully playable stage, so that's cool. Plus, there's a little warp thing that lets you zip across the zone, but something just feels off. Like, I'm not saying Death Egg is bad because it's not. It's just a bit more slowed down, and it has the challenge that should come with a final level. And the actual boss of Act 2 is one of my favorite mechs I've ever seen Robotnik use. But the mini-boss in Act 1 is basically the same fight as Winged Fortress and Flying Battery, except it can actually be tough if you aren't careful, and for some reason I just can't vibe with it. Like I said though, the actual boss of Death Egg is cool. It's the first two-phase fight I can think of in Sonic. The boss will do the hand thing like the mini-boss in Lava Reef, but Phase 2 is an auto-scroller fight, where you have to keep moving while opening the robot up to a hit, plus dodging the fire coming out of the nose, plus the charge lasers from the Master Emerald, all the while making sure you don't fall off. If you're playing as Sonic or Tails alone and you don't have emeralds, then I would recommend extreme caution, because dying here is extremely easy. If you're playing as Sonic and Tails together, I would suggest hitting it once as Sonic to open it up for a real hit and then have Tails land the real hit so that you can focus on moving and dodging. After enough hits, the robot will be destroyed and Robotnik tries to escape with the Master Emerald, so you have to give chase and then hit Robotnik while the Death Egg is once again crumbling beneath you, and then after enough hits, the ship will explode and this is where the game would end. That is, if you didn't collect either the Chaos Emeralds or Super Emeralds. Because we have our first ever supersonic fight in the entire franchise, Doomsday Zone. This lays down the foundation for how supersonic final fights would work from here on forward. It is your job to chase the target, land a hit, repeat, all the while making sure your ring count doesn't hit 0 or you will die. This is a two-phase fight. Phase 1 has you chasing Robotnik down, gathering rings, and dodging asteroids. Once you catch up, Robotnik will shoot little missiles and pellets. Both of these will knock you if you get hit. However, the missiles hone in on you and you have to lure them back to Robotnik to actually deal damage. Once you land enough hits, the outer shell of the mech will be destroyed, and the real chase begins to destroy a modified Death Egg robot. All you have to do here is land hits on the mech itself while dodging bombs. After a few more hits, our journey is finally over. The Death Egg is destroyed, Robotnik is defeated, and the Master Emerald is returned to its proper place on Angel Island. Peace has been restored. So it could be because I haven't played Doom Zone in a hot minute, so my skill may just not be there, but man, this fight can drag. Between being hit by everything and trying to make sure my ring count was staying up, I was seriously afraid I was going to time over. But hey, we did it. If you don't suck like I do, then the fight is a perfectly fine first Supersonic fight, one that would start a legacy for years to come. And that, my friends, is the complete journey of Sonic 3. Despite the small dip in quality, there at the very end, I cannot express how much I love this game. The fix was wrong with Sonic 1 and 2 to create what I consider an almost perfect 2D Sonic experience, with the only competition being Sonic Mania, which wouldn't release until 23 years later. If you wanted me to pick a single 2D Sonic game for someone to try, it would honestly just be one of those two. I hold them in that high of a regard. However, I should rephrase what I said. This was the complete journey of Sonic's side of the game, because Knuckles has his own unique story.
Come and witness the tale of the warrior Knuckles. Yeah.
Knuckles' story is actually an epilogue of Sonic's story, almost like a reverse rebirth situation for those who have played Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. The story kicks off with Knuckles just hanging out and finally enjoying some peace. Then he just randomly gets bombed by a regular egg robo who decides that he's gonna get vengeance for the poor doctor. So Knuckles decides to give chase throughout the entire island. This is a perfect enough of an excuse to have Knuckles go through every single zone in the game, at least for one act. I say at least once because there's legitimate moments where Knuckles doesn't even have a boss at the end of Act 2, or maybe not even have an Act 2 to begin with. Something that I like about this run in general is that the changes made during Sonic's story is still here. The bridge into Ancient Island that leads to Hydrocity? Gone. The Ghost in Sandopolis? Already released. Details like that is something I will always appreciate in a game. Knuckles as a character plays drastically different from both Sonic and Tails. He is the slowest of the group and his jump is the shortest. But in exchange he can glide, climb up walls, and destroy obstacles that can lead to paths he can only take. Even if this wasn't an epilogue, that alone I feel like would make a Knuckles playthrough worth it. In terms of the Chaos Emeralds, Knuckles gets them the same way as Sonic and Tails. Once you get all 7, you turn into Super Knuckles. He's supersonic, but flashes pink instead of just being yellow, and he can climb walls faster. If you get the Super Emeralds, you turn into Hyper Knuckles, where the only real difference is that he has a wall screen nuke where he climbs a wall, punches it, and all the badniks go away. And also, he's permanently pink now. If you're going for the Emeralds at all, in my opinion, just go for the Chaos Emeralds. I don't think, in all truth and sincerity, that Hyper Knuckles is worth it, and you can even just ignore the Super Emeralds once you get to Mushroom Hill. Meaning, you can keep Super Knuckles and still get the best ending. Which, speaking of, let's go ahead and get back to the plot. Knuckles gives chase to the Egg Robo all the way to Sky Sanctuary with the Master Emerald already there. Knuckles tries to attack the Egg Robo but is caught by the same crane that was used to grab the Master Emerald. Knuckles is then dragged across the screen to see Mecha Sonic fully repaired and ready for another fight, which is evident by the fact that he guns straight towards Knuckles and Egg Robo. Knuckles gets out of the way, but Egg Robo is gone for good, because I mean he was just a regular badnik. The fight with Mecha Sonic goes exactly like Sonic's run and isn't hard at all. Mecha Sonic is beaten and that's the game.
Enough! I'll crush you!
Mecha Sonic decides that he's going to be the first character ever to absorb the Master Emerald's power to turn super. And guess what? Just like Super Sonic, he's invincible while in the state. His two main attacks while in Super are either shooting pretty big energy blasts, dashing at you, and then eventually once the fight is almost over, he shoots like a circle of projectiles, but he does temporarily overheat and has to recharge. This is your very short chance of landing a hit. And after a few more hits, Mecha Sonic is finally defeated and Sky Sanctuary explodes. Good thing Sonic came back with the tornado to catch both Knuckles and the Master Emerald. Sonic drops both Knuckles and the Master Emerald back at Ancient Island, which is now stable once more. And our journey through these games are finally over. But like I said earlier, I love this game, and going back to do a Knuckles run for this video was a worthwhile experience. Plus, Mecha Sonic honestly goes from just another robot to one of the coolest final bosses ever. And this is all just because he can go super, in which you don't typically see. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the reason why he is still popular in the community to this day. I can't believe we're finally at this point. All 3 games done, all 27 special stages beaten. I may have died more than I was hoping, but hey, we did it. If I can break the 4th wall for a second and just talk about this video. My goal was to have this video done and uploaded on June 23rd, 2024 to celebrate Sonic's birthday. I thought I started working on it with plenty of time, but as I was recording gameplay for each run and thinking about how I was going to do this video, it became crystal clear that this project was way bigger than I could have ever planned for. I'm still shooting for the 23rd, but you should be able to look at the upload date and tell if we made it or not. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter when this goes up. I made this video as a love letter to the Sonic franchise. A video game character that if I didn't meet all those years ago, I wouldn't be here today with you guys. I hope I was able to convey the idea that to make a good sequel, you don't have to do complete 180 of what your first game was, or do a complete overhaul of your system. It can be as simple as adding a few new things, and that's what I think is so beautiful about the classic Sonic trilogy. It makes changes to help improve the next game, but the heart is still there and it's still so simple. You go from point A to point B at the speed of light, or you can take your time to explore each stage, finding new routes to take and discovering new things you may have not known the last run. It resonates with Sonic's own belief of being free as the wind. It's truly a wonderful experience. If you have any stories with Sonic or just have something to say, then drop it in the comments. If you made it to this far in the video, then feel free to like the video and subscribe. No matter what, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you. Till next time.